UFO Bros.
Hey everyone, it's Giorgio Tsoukalos from Ancient Aliens, and you're experiencing UFO Bros TV.
That's right. What's up, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good evening. This is Emmett.
And it's Joe.
And we are the
UFO
Bros. And we're really
Broskies.
super excited. We've got a special guest.
Special guest. We've been waiting.
And we're going to bring him on here in just a few minutes. But first, we're going to talk about, holy moly, Joe, the amount of new followers we have on Facebook.
Oh, it's exploded.
Instagram, Twitter. Thank you all so very much for being...
all the subscribers and supporters that we have. And a couple new, one Patreon.
Oh, yeah, we have a new patron. So thank you. And by the way, for all of you who are maybe new to this and just listening, you can follow us on all things social media at UFO Bros TV, except for Twitter, Joe, which is
UF0 Bros TV.
That's right. That's the only handle that's not consistent. It drives me crazy, but that's okay.
Especially USD.
Yes. So you guys, we're just rolling along here. We're preparing for a new voyage, which we'll be talking about soon. We're really excited about it. And today, though, this is super great. We've got Dr. Jerry Kroth on the show. Mm-hmm. And before I bring him on, because he's so patiently waiting, I wanted to tell, our listeners, Joe, how I found him. How I found out about him.
Yeah.
I found out about him. So, as you all know, I love Roswell. It's like my most favorite UFO alien topic to talk about. We've been there.
Oh, yeah.
We slept in the field where the UFO had supposedly crashed, where we had Wi-Fi.
We had Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere. Let's bring nowhere to now here.
Hey, it looks like we got a few people on chat, too,
Mariska
so we'll be chatting with them. And by the way, as we speak with Dr. Kroth, we're going to ask you guys, if you're on the chat room, feel free to shoot any questions you might have. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to see if he can chime in and answer them. So, here's the story. I spent about 2 weeks, probably, researching everything I could possibly find on Roswell. And specifically, I was looking into the memory metal. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Roswell story, one of the things that was supposedly retrieved from a crashed alien spacecraft that had crashed in the plains of area near Roswell, New Mexico, 1947, as you know.
As it were.
Along with aliens and things, an extraordinary sort of metal was picked up and handled by quite a few people who have testified and even signed subpoenas and things like that. Believe it or not. I don't know what that does, but...
Subpoenas?
Yeah, subpoenas. Sometimes you need subpoenas. Sometimes you... Oh, sorry. Anyway. Subpoenas. I don't know why they would do that, but it's interesting because this metal supposedly super thin and...
You can't crinkle it.
You can't like... you can't put a crease in it. You can't cut it. You can't burn it.
Can't stab it.
Can't stab it. You can't stand it. Sorry, I got on a roll there. But here's the really cool thing, Joe. Dr. Kroth is, I think, in my research, the only person
that's researched it.
It not only is probably... Well, he has, like, reached out to so many people. I'm going to let him tell this story about kind of, like, where he's at now. But... here's the basic story. In the 60s, he handled something very similar to the Roswell material, at least in the way that it behaved. And I'm going to kind of let him talk about that. So without further ado, let me make sure I have to unmute him first. All right, you guys. I'm really super excited. So if you guys can please... give a huge welcome to Dr. Jerry Kroth, who is now on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sir.
Are you there? Are you there, Dr. Kroth?
Yeah.
Oh.
I lost you for a second.
Oh, it must be the authorities. They don't want us to talk about your recent findings. So, oh man, I just want to tell you, I'm so happy to have you on the show. Joe and I, our mind was blown when we were watching the amazing lecture you have on YouTube, which, by the way, I recommend anybody interested in this topic. Not just Roswell, but the UFO alien sort of phenomenon and, you know, the secrets that are being kept within the government. That sort of thing. You got to watch this lecture. I personally think it's the best one on YouTube. So if what we'll do is we'll post it on our social media. It's a fantastic lecture. So now, Dr. Kroth, we ran into each other, I think, in a forum. I got your email from somewhere because you had started making some progress on kind of finding the earthly, maybe, I guess, explanation for some of these characteristics of this metal. Will you tell us what happened in the 60s that really piqued your curiosity, and then how recently you tied that together?
All right, so imagine I'm right out of college. No, I don't even have my master's yet or my PhD, and I'm teaching. I thought I was teaching fourth grade. It turns out I was teaching fifth grade, and this little girl comes up to me, and she says, my daddy says, can I show you this? And I said, sure. And she showed me a 5 by 5 inch piece of what looked like aluminum foil, and I said, oh, okay. She said, okay, squeeze it. So I crushed it, and then she said, okay, let it go. And I let it go, and it completely opened up and went back to its original flat 5 by 5 inch shape. And I said, that's not aluminum foil. Aluminum foil doesn't do that. And then she said, well, try to cut it. I said, is that okay with your daddy? And she said, yeah. So I was a teacher, and I had like 35 kids in my class. I was just right out of college, and so I had like lots of different scissors, and I tried to cut it. It wouldn't cut. It just bent. And I thought, wow. She said, well, try to put a hole in it. I said, is that okay? Okay, yeah. So I jammed a ballpoint pen, and then I jammed a piece of metal in it. Nothing. It would just... It was, I mean, this stuff was the thickness of a piece of 20-pound stationery. Wow. But it was silvery on the front and a little bit grayish on the back, and it was somewhat rubbery. So I never thought a thing about... I thought her father works for NASA. It's a piece of material that's being developed. This was, 1965? And I never thought about it again until... around 2008, I was writing a book, my first book on aliens and extraterrestrials. And I'm reading this crazy book by a man named Philip Corso, who said he was at Roswell, just like you were. Mm-hmm. Except he was there in 1947. And I'm reading this book, and I think, this man is nuts. He's crazy. He's talking about aliens, and they crash landed, and there were 3 bodies, and the Air Force, there was one that was trying to crawl out of a hole, and the Air Force shot him, and they did autopsies on them. They were about 3.5 feet tall, large-headed. And I thought, why are you reading this? You've lost your mind. You're a professor at a university, you know. And then I read this paragraph, and I swear I froze in my tracks. I was in San Diego, and it said, when we were at the crash site, we found this material that was 5 inches by 5 inches. If you crushed it, it would open up immediately. If you tried to cut it, you couldn't. If you tried to stab it with anything, you could not puncture it. And I said, oh my God, I had that in my hands. I had that in my hands, I don't know, 40, 50, 55, some 42 years ago.
Wow.
And
it gives me chills.
That's when I gave me chills. I mean, I said, oh my God, this guy is not nuts. The man was 80 years old. He was writing this book. And I thought, what if this man is telling the truth? That means that a spacecraft crashed. That means that there were 3 aliens. That means that The Air Force covered it up. That means that this material that I held in my hands, I actually never, ever saw this material again. I mean, if this was some kind of commercial product, where is it?
Yeah.
I've never seen it or touched it. It's not Kevlar. It's not Mylar. So that's the beginning of this story. There's much more. So what's your next question?
Well, I was just going to say, you are probably, even though it was in the 60s, I think the most recent person actually to have had their hands on a material with that characteristics. I mean, I haven't heard anybody recently say, oh, yeah, I handle, only you. And I wanted to ask you, just want to go back a little bit, because you said that when you try to cut it, it would bend. Could you expand on that a little bit, what you mean by it would bend?
Well, let's say you had a pair of scissors that were completely dull, okay? And then that you tried to cut a piece of paper. What would happen if you cut a piece of paper with totally dull scissors?
It would just probably flop
It would
right
just
between the blades.
Exactly, except I had very, very sharp scissors, but I could not cut this material. It flopped, it bent, it would not cut. You couldn't puncture it. You couldn't do anything with it. And by the way, I'm not the last person. I discovered two people in Ohio who had touched this material in 1977.
Oh, well, the mystery deepens.
Yeah, that's in my book. I found this. I have this great investigator named Tony Baraglia, who's a UFO guy, and I got in touch with him and I said, who else has touched this? Because there are 37 people in my book who've held this material in their hands.
Now, is this a new book or is it currently out? Because I'd like to talk about that too. Make sure people pick it up.
No, it's brand new, right out. It's called Extraterrestrial Contacts: The Roswell Foil, UFOs, and How They Alter Our Understanding of the Modern World. Just Kroth, Extraterrestrial Contacts. So it's a brand new book. Okay, so back to this investigation. There was a girl in Ohio who discovered this, and her uncle, whose name was Harold Ifland, came over in 1977 to her house, and he showed her this material. And she was playing with it, and she did the same thing that I did. She rolled it up, she tried to cut it and the whole thing, and he took it back, and that was it. And I said, well, who is your uncle Harold? Harold Ifland. And I looked him up, and Tony looked him up, and we tried to find out, where is this guy from? And he was from Dayton, Ohio. And guess what? He had a bachelor's degree in chemistry from the University of Michigan. He worked for the top secret Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
And that's where they said the material went to.
thickens.
That's where they said the
Absolutely.
material went to was Wright-Patterson in Ohio. So that makes sense.
Totally.
Wow.
Now, on your investigation and searching for, by the way, I think it's fantastic that you're like zeroed in on trying to figure out these people, and because that's what, I think this needs to happen, for sure.
Right.
What have you found recently, if anything, that somewhat resembles, the Roswell material, but is in fact earthly? You know what I mean? So, because you talked about Mylar and Kevlar, yeah.
Now you're going to enjoy this. I'm an academic, so I approached this very academically, and I wrote to 100 professors of physics, chemistry, material science, and I said, without ever mentioning Roswell, I said, what was I holding in my hands in 1965 that existed? Because I've never seen it again. Now, about half, I got 42 responses, and half of those people said, I have no idea. There was no such thing that existed in 1965 that had those characteristics. The ability to crush something and have it open up to its former place is called shape memory. And there's only one substance called nitinol that has shape memory, but that's not at room temperature. So I bought Mylar and Kevlar. Some people said it was Kevlar. One DuPont scientist said it was Hytrel. I bought all these things, and none of them were similar. Now, the producer of your show, I don't know who he was, I forgot his name, he's in my email. He sent me a YouTube video of something that was just recently developed by someone, probably last year. And it's very, very close. It's the closest thing I have ever seen. But it is not what I had in my hands in 1965. Nothing.
Interesting.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So, by the way, I think you're talking about rubber metal, right? Is that what you were saying?
That's a very good term for it. Rubber metal. I mean, aluminized cloth. They call it different things.
Wow. And so I want to ask you this. Is there anything that's come close but just doesn't have that one thing? I mean, like...
No, absolutely nothing. If I had this material, if you had a shirt made of this material, it would be shiny, it would never wrinkle, it would never crease. If somebody tried to stab you, they would never succeed.
I need that shirt.
I wonder if it's bulletproof.
I'm sure. I think that's how Kevlar, by the way, and bulletproof vests came. The government tried to reverse engineer this material, and that's how we got bulletproof vests.
Oh, man.
Wow. That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Do you know, as far right now...
This is Joe, by the way.
This is Joe. Are they still studying this material right now? Have they reversed it a little bit more? Is it still question marks?
Who's they? There's total denial about this material. There's no one talks about this material other than UFO people.
Okay. Then
crazy people like us, Joe, when we sit at lunch and we talk about the Roswell Memory.
But by the way, Tony Baraglia and his colleague studied it, and the government started an intense research program on nitinol, on a material called nitinol, which is made of nickel and titanium. The government got very interested in titanium in 1948, 1 year after Roswell, probably because this material was made out of nickel and titanium.
Now, I want to ask you, because I think you'd probably know. I'd spoken to a lot of people, and somebody swore up and down to me, they're talking about Mylar. They just saw Mylar. I did some research on Mylar and realized that I don't think it was available in 47.
No, but it came out in 65, and I was curious because that's when I had my material, and I wanted to know more about Mylar and Kevlar. But they both crease. I'm sorry, they crease.
I think that's amazing to take something that thin and be able to just... Did it make any noise when you crinkled it? Did it make any sounds at all?
I don't remember. I'm sorry, I do not remember.
That's okay. I just still think it's absolutely mind-blowing. And so now I know that the girl in your class, have you ever found her? No. In fact, I said, one UFO researcher said, why are you just sitting on your ass? Why don't you try to find out who she was? And I said, okay, I'll try. And I looked, and I said, I thought I taught fourth grade, and then I found that there were some alumni of this class, and they remembered me, and I was their favorite teacher, and they said, no, you taught fifth grade. I said, really? I didn't remember a single person in my class. I think I was 24 years old, okay? Well, how could you?
And so, yeah, and it turns out that one of the girls in the class, now these kids are 11, she went 7 years later, she fell in love with the guy who she was sitting next to. They married, they had kids, and now they're grandparents. Wow. And so they've stayed in touch with everybody. And this girl who gave me this, and some people in the class remembered this girl brought this material to class one day. And her name is Denise Daly, and she had a twin sister named either Patricia or Veronica Daly in another classroom. I hired, not hired, but a private detective volunteered. Another private detective volunteered. I must have called 28 Denise Dalys looking for a twin sister, Veronica. Nothing, dead end, nothing. I found one, the closest one. They said her father was probably in the military. She wasn't in school long. And that was my best lead.
Wow. Man, you are serious about this. I love it. I'm definitely going to keep following everything you're doing, because you're doing everything I could conceivably do, which is, who was that girl? Who is she related to? Now, let me ask you.
She's either 62 or 63 or 64 right now.
We got to find her, Joe.
We got to find her. We do.
Joe and I, we will go find her. We're going to go to her house if we can find her.
See if she has a foil.
Maybe she still has it.
That, not the foil. But.
I wonder if she stole it from her dad, or if her dad was like, show this to your teacher. How do you think that went down?
My theory is that I worked out near Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, and that was a secret research facility there called the Willow Run Research Laboratories. I think her father must have worked there and had some connection to Wright-Patterson in Ohio. And I tried to research the people who worked there, and that was also a dead end. I found a Daly who worked there, but nothing that I'm sorry, I wish I could report good news, but I can't.
Wow. Well, we're going to keep... I'm going to tell you something. When I watched your online lecture, I actually started Googling her myself. Trying to find her. Trying to go, does she look old enough? Because I want to know. I want to talk.
Wait, they get married. They change their names. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have no idea where she went.
If only to find her. And now, let's go to your book real quick, because first of all, where can people find the book? So we've got some people in the chat room very interested. And if you could tell us where to get your book, and is it downloadable, or is it in physical form, or both?
You just go to Kroth, Kroth, and you go to Amazon and you say extraterrestrial contacts, and it'll take you there. Or Barnes and Noble, or iBookstore, or Google Books. It's downloadable. I think it's about $5.99, something like that. And this is the first chapter of that story, because that's how this whole story started.
I highly recommend people to get that book. Let me tell you why. Support this gentleman who is spending, I can't even imagine the amount of time and resources trying to figure this out. And probably this is the only person I've ever talked to or known of that has, actually held this material. Now, also, can you tell us some other things in your book that is interesting or notable that we should know about?
Well, that was just chapter 1, and then I said, well, what if Roswell actually happened? What does that mean? That means that the human race... Are you still there?
Yes, we are.
Okay. That means that the human race has been in contact with an extraterrestrial culture. That is the biggest story of the human race in our 150,000-year history. There is no bigger story than that. So it's either false, or it is the biggest story of our lifetime. There is no gray area. It's either false, or it's either left or right. So beginning with that, I said, okay, let's take a look at UFO stories. There's a lot of crackpot stories, and what makes a good UFO story? I said in chapter 2, corroboration. If one person saw a thing, that's great. But if 75 people saw it, by the way, there are 78 witnesses to the Roswell event in my book. 78 people either saw the bodies, or they saw the material, or they were part of the cover-up, or they were part of the caskets that they brought,
Wow.
or they flew the bodies. There are 78 people, some of whom signed deathbed confessions. Wow. That's a lot of corroborative testimony, don't you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the fact that you've compiled all that together in the book is... Now, I want to ask you just really quickly on the topic of the crash and all that. Oh, Joe is falling asleep. Are you awake? Okay.
Don't fall asleep.
No, I'm not asleep.
It's me. It's when I start talking. It's not you. Now, I had this... Well, Joe and I, we were talking about this on the last show, where the Roswell story seemed so simple at first. Oh, well, not simple. I mean, it's a complicated story. But I mean, the narrative, which was... a UFO crashed during a thunderstorm, and foil and I-beams and aliens were recovered, and to Wright Patterson. And I wanted to ask you, in your research and figuring out the eyewitnesses that were there, were the story where the aliens were supposedly retrieved, is that a separate story from the people who handled, say, the foil and the I-beams, or are both of those stories kind of connected in the same event in the same place?
Well, the people who collected the material, there were allegedly 10 pieces of this material, and the government made a very strong effort to collect absolutely everything. But a couple pieces of this material escaped, and one kid in New Mexico used to do magic tricks with it, and he would take it out and show people and crush it up, and it would do this and that and do this. It's normal stuff. And so there was at least one piece of material that the government never managed to grab. So the material that I had, I believe this girl's father must have worked for the military, and he said, why don't you just show this to your teacher and bring it home to me? The same way Uncle Harold Ifland showed the material to his niece. People, I mean, this was very fascinating material. It was like magic. There is no such material in the world, and when you hold it, you never forget that. You never forget the experience. But the other people at Roswell who saw the bodies or who transported the bodies, they may not have come in contact with the material at all. People had different functions.
Interesting. And have you come to any kind of understanding as whether there was one crash site or two crash sites or one disc or two discs? Have you looked into that at all? Because there's a lot of speculation on whether it was one ship or two or three that crashed.
I know there's so much controversy. The guy who reported this story, Philip Corso, has been so completely debunked. I'm embarrassed to even mention his name because people think he was a crackpot and a nutcase, and yet he's the one who wrote a book which informed me and reminded me of my experience. So I don't dismiss him, but a lot of people, including very, very reputable UFO researchers, say the man was a fraud. So, I mean, every turn you make on this story, you run into truth or falsehood, fake or not fake, and it's very difficult to find the truth. In my belief from my own research is Roswell happened, the government concealed it, Barry Goldwater, the senator, was right. They are holding this information at Wright-Patterson. He believed that they were doing it. They're hiding it from the public, and they're doing it for good reason. They believe that if they told the public that UFOs contacted humanity, it would cause a bit of a crisis psychologically.
Exactly. I think, for me personally, I think that it would definitely end religion.
I don't know if it would end religion. I mean, the Catholic Church is already studying this problem. I don't think it would end religion. It would just mean that it would scare people. It would scare people.
To panic, you think?
No, but they would get. It would be destabilizing. Do you know that the government? Do you know anything about the I forget the name of it. It was a study that was done by the Rand Corporation in the 1950s. The government commissioned a study about what would happen if we told the people UFOs existed.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Well, why would they do that unless they had some reason to do that?
Exactly.
But the Rand Corporation said, do not tell them. It will cause too much panic.
Wow. That was a long time ago, too.
Yeah.
You think?
Do you think we're ready for it now? Do you think that the people could know that, okay, guys, look, Roswell was 70 years ago, I think people could handle it. What do you think, personally?
I'm not so sure.
Okay. I think I'd handle it fine. I know,
I
Joe.
think you'd probably be so shocked you wouldn't know what to do.
Like, I guess the question is, what would be a disclosure event, Joe?
Well,
Donald Trump comes, there was an alien. Oh, sorry.
If you think about it, well, what if we accepted that, then wait a minute. The origins of the human race, if there were extraterrestrials involved with us, did they mess with us? Did they mess with our DNA? Did they have anything to do with the evolution of Homo sapiens? I mean, we've been here for almost 196,000 years.
Good point.
And we started to get smart only about 10,000 years ago. All of the old ancient cultures talk about the gods who came from the stars, the Egyptians, the Sumerians. So what if that we treat that as fantasy? What if that was real? What if all those stories were actually true? It would change our history, our mythology, our understanding of ourselves, our understandings of the evolution of our species. It would change everything.
I agree. I do feel in a lot of ways that we are stuck in a bubble that people want us to be in. I mean, we're constantly checking our phones. We're constantly moving on to the next thing. You got to pick up the kids. You got to go to work. You got to go to school. You got to clean the house. There's really no time, really, for I think the average person, nor do they care to even think about it. As to what's going on, really. So I do agree with you. I do feel like we are indeed stuck in some kind of information bubble, almost like we're in the age of deceit or in the age of misinformation about who we are, where we come from, and potentially where we be going. And I wanted to ask you this because one of our chatters said, one of the theories would be, I don't know if you've heard this, that the Roswell incident was actually time travelers that came from the past. Have you heard this?
No.
Okay. There is a gentleman, I'll have to get his name for you, that claims he's the one that designed the Roswell ship that crashed and that he has a mission to make sure he finishes it so that it goes back in time to keep the story going. So it all gets so crazy. But I wanted to know, do you think that's possible? I mean, if we're talking about aliens, is it possible maybe we could be considering time travelers?
Well, I have to tell you that I'm considered probably quite weird, but I'm very conservative on these issues. So there are so many strange theories out there, and people who are in touch with the aliens and who are interpreting crop circles that I avoid this so much that I'm kind of embarrassed to even tell you how I sort out that junk and try to find the jewels amidst the junk. And so I have to say that I don't go for that. I did think, well, if there was by the way, there are some distinguished physicists like Michao, I can't pronounce his name, he's a quantum physicist, who believes that the aliens have bases on the dark side of the moon, and that they are frequently, that's where they're based, and they frequently patrol the Earth. And there are a number of solid people who believe that that's true. And so where did they come from? And if they came from the Orion Belt, which is where Egyptian mythology puts them, that's 1,200 light years away. Sirius, the star Sirius, and that constellation of stars, seems like a more likely place because that's could be a lot fewer light years. So where they're from, we don't know. But there are reasonable and logical possibilities, and which do not involve time travel, that could explain how they got here. They might take them a few hundred years to go back and forth.
Yeah, by the way, you said you felt you were embarrassed or something to tell how you sorted out. I would love to know, because well, Joe and I, we're always trying to sort this stuff out. So, maybe apart from crop circles, as one of our chat room guests is asking, is there anything else that you think doesn't fit the narrative, or is a hoax, I guess you could say, or just a bunch of BS? Is there anything in particular that you go, okay? Because I can name a few, like the mummies in Peru that they dug up. That's supposedly a huge hoax. That's obviously not true. Anything like that?
Well, I studied the mummies too. They have the elongated skulls, and now there's one guy who has a bachelor's degree who says he's a geneticist, and these mummies don't have human DNA. Well, that's pretty arrogant for a guy with a bachelor's degree to say, but what's true is that the skulls do exist. They have elongated heads. Egyptian skulls have elongated heads. Siberian skulls have elongated skulls. Why? And my theory is that the aliens had elongated skulls, and that human beings copied them, especially the Egyptian pharaohs, Akhenaten and his children. And so they tried to emulate or copy the structure of the what the aliens looked like. And so this weird culture of creating children who have elongated skulls, there's a long history of it, and that is in fact true.
Yeah, I was talking about specifically the recent. I guess they dug up like 3 mummies. Have you heard of this?
I think it's a hoax. I always check all this stuff with my friend Tony Baragli. He's good to read. He's very shy, but he's a really good researcher, and he says it's all phony. It's all a hoax. So I believe him.
Yeah, and so. You're a very, very smart man, by the way. I'm loving speaking with you. And just to kind of move off into another direction about ufology, I had noticed, would it be right to say that you were pretty active and took a break? Or have you been consistently involved kind of in this space for a while?
No, I'm an interloper. I come and I go. I got involved in this, and then I go on to something else. I'm not part of the community of ufologists.
Yes, because I want to talk about that. What do you think is the biggest... I mean, as you're coming and going, I mean, you're getting different, snippets of what's going on in the world of ufology. What do you think is the biggest issue right now in the world of ufology?
Government secrecy and repression of the truth. That's the biggest one. I mean, the fact that the government, it is to one person, I forgot his name, but he's cited in my book, it is the biggest secret in the United States of America, and has been the biggest secret of all time.
Yeah.
And so when you think about its significance and what it means, that makes sense. There are even generals. When Barry Goldwater asked his good friend Curtis LeMay, can I go into the green room in Wright-Patterson and see the alien bodies? Right, General Curtis LeMay, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, how much higher can you go? He said, don't you ever fucking ask me. I'm sorry, I used that word.
Yes,
said,
yes, the F word, fuck. Say it again.
He said, don't you ever ask me that question again, you son of a bitch. He called him all, he swore at him, and it's like, okay, I mean, obviously the guy knew something. There are generals in the government who don't know what other generals know. There's a great book by a lady called The Generals, UFOs, and something or other. She's in my book. I forgot her name now. It's not in front of me. It was published by Random House. Very, very good book. She says that there are so many pockets of secrecy in the government. One arm of government doesn't know what the other government arm doesn't know.
I would agree. Joe would agree.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to ask you this. I just want to run this by you before I let you go, because we're just down to a few minutes here. I just wanted to say, I think we've got, obviously, the cover-up. We've got the secrecy. We've got the lying. I think I was thinking, and Joe and I talk about this, in the ufology world today, it seems very much the people involved, the leaders, the speaking heads, the people that we go to for information. There seems to be very kind of religious feeling to ufology right now. Whereas, who are you following? Are you following Corey Goode? Are you following Dr. Greer? Are you, there's all these people who are claiming to have this truth. As an example, Corey Goode, I'm sure you're familiar with that name, was just on Ancient Aliens, talking about being in a secret space program and that sort of thing. I just want to get your thought on these people that are coming out and, making a living and getting, put on a pedestal, so to speak, who I really feel it's like a religious vibe. It's like, follow me. And when you go to some of the UFO events, you kind of feel that too. And I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that.
My feeling is that they're just watching. They're not interacting. They have not contacted. They are not. There's no connection between them. They are attempting to communicate with us.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I believe crop circles is the medium that they're using, and if you they're very. Every time you try to interpret a crop circle, people call you crazy. But in my book, I've interpreted 3 or 4 with scientific consultants, and it's really kind of scary. They're sending us warnings about global warming and about our abuse of the planet. But other than that, I love what Stephen Greer did on his Disclosure Project. I thought that was a great contribution. As far as his meditations and his attempt to communicate with them, I'm looking at that, but I don't see anything convincing. And so,
well, we were there in the desert when he was doing it. It was really weird. He's speaking in tongues and stuff. We went to an event he was at, and we got to shake his hand. And he went to the bathroom, and he had 6 security guards to go pee. I always tell this story, but
why?
Oh my gosh. Dr. Greer?
Is he that paranoid?
That guy is. I don't know if he's paranoid or if he's just bringing attention. I don't know. But the guy is constantly surrounded in security guards. I mean, Joe and I, when we went to the last event, we had to break through and be like, "Can we please have a picture with you?" He's just an interesting person, and I'll tell you, he kind of started losing me and Joe when he started talking about how he astral projects to other planets, and
that's where I get off too.
Right.
We by the way, I gave a talk at a MUFON conference. I did
Dr. Kroth, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you know we've got about a minute left. So if we could wrap up in about 15 seconds or 30 seconds, that'd be awesome.
I met some good people who I believe, who are honest, who've had encounters, and I believe them. And that's the raw data that I think is that you take home with you.
I think we're on the same page.
Oh, yeah.
We want to thank you so much, Dr. Kroth, for being on our show. And, we're a little silly, but we do take the topic seriously, and we like to have, a good conversation about these things. And we are, just for anybody listening, we're definitely going to post a link to buy the book, and also the lecture on YouTube. So thank you so much, Dr. Kroth.
Thank you very much, sir.
Be in touch with you soon.
Me.
You're so welcome.
Oh, yes. We'll definitely have you on again.
Talk to you soon. Thank you,
sir.
That was awesome.
I like that guy.
Holy moly. I feel so official. I talked to somebody with a PhD that I didn't have to trek around in the bathroom and get through security guards. Fantastic. All right. Well, if you guys liked this,
thumb it up, thumb it down, thumb
it up, thumb it down, like it, subscribe,
follow, favorite,
link the bell, ring the bell, or whatever. But we had a blast. Thank you to all of our chatters. Paul Curtis, you've been absolutely fantastic in contributing to this conversation. We appreciate you. Well, we got to go, everybody. I'm Emmett Joe, and we are the UFO Bros. See you next time on Twitter. Donald Trump tells everybody about the aliens.